You are listening to Agri Culture, a podcast that aims to explore the stories of the people that make up our agriculture industry and culture of farming in Scotland and beyond. On today's episode,
Yeah, it's been quite hard going. There's probably there's been struggles there, but yeah, I feel like I'm sort of rising from the ashes a bit now with my sauerkraut in hand. Like Rome wasn't built in a day, and things will take a lot longer than you anticipate. And but to not be disheartened, there is actually quite a lot of help out there, and it's not always immediately obvious. And quite often, it's when you, like I did this Impact 30 scheme, that opened other doors of other sort of possibilities. So and other connections, and yeah, I would say networking as well was really important.
I'm Mary Jane Laurie, and today I'm joined by Barbara McLeod. Barbara owns and runs Cruciferous Croft in the Lochinver area of northwest Scotland. She took on a croft herself, renovating an old building to live in, and has since started growing vegetables, finding most success with cabbages. This gave her the idea to start fermenting them into sauerkraut to add value. She now sells her products at food festivals and fairs. She tells us about what it was like getting started in crofting and discusses heritage practices such as using seaweed for fertiliser and following chemical-free growing practices. She also tells us about the various sources of funding and support she has used to get her business up and running. Hi Barbara, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Mary Jane. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Not at all. Can you start by telling us a bit about Cruciferous Croft? What do you produce and how did it all begin?
Okay, well, yeah, it's a bit of a long story, but we'll start at the top. Well, Cruciferous Croft is a field to plate sauerkraut and fermented vegetable business. And it's all from my croft in Inverkirk, just outside Lochinver in the area of Assynt in Northwest Highlands.
Mm-hmm. And how did it all begin? Are you from a crofting or farming background?
Very much so. On both sides of the family, both my mother and father are from a long line of crofters on the sort of west coast area. So yes, it was a sort of yeah, a Cheviot sheep stock rearing croft I was brought up on. That was the backdrop of my whole childhood. So yeah, I was always, you know, in the fank or, shoeing sheep or, feeding pet lambs, that kind of thing.
And you mentioned at the start there that you're from sort of the northwest of Scotland. So for anyone listening who's not familiar with what the landscape might be like, can you describe the area and the landscape to us?
Of course, yes. Well, it's quite dramatic. It's not the most sort of hospitable, sort of fertile land. It's very craggy, and it's quite tough conditions for crofting in, I would say.
And what's your croft like?
So my croft, it's about 4 acres or so, which I'm sure to some of your listeners will sound just like a postage stamp, but it's enough to, yeah, for my business anyway, for my business purposes. So yeah, probably about not all of that 4 acres is arable land. There's trees and like quite a lot of rockiness. It's right on the coast next to the sea, but yeah, there's a good 2 acres of soil that can be worked with.
And when you took it on, did you inherit it from someone else or did you come across the opportunity to buy your own?
Well, I was very fortunate actually. There was people that were getting quite elderly that had retired up here from Glasgow, and yeah, they were having health issues and wanted to move back near to the sort of main arteries.
Hmm.
And I think they wanted to just do something quite noble, and they wanted to assign the croft to somebody younger and give somebody younger the chance, which was
Yeah.
a fantastic opportunity. So the house, the croft originally it had their house, which they decrofted and sold, but they left the croft and there was a building on it that hadn't been lived in for a good sort of 30 years. So that came as part of the croft. So that became a house for me to live in. So my dad helped, he's a crofter and a joiner, so he helped me to get that into sort of livable condition. So that was 12 years ago now.
That must have been quite a thought, coming into the croft as a sort of not a new crofter because you're from a crofting family, but to take on a new bit of land and have to renovate an old building into a house.
Yeah, it was a lot to take on, and so work wise, crofting up until sort of taking over the tenure of the croft. wasn't sort of part of my thing. I'd actually left school and gone to art school and done jewellery and metalwork there. So yeah, that was kind of like my career, and yeah, I was self-employed as a jewellery designer and maker, and yeah, it was going really well actually. I was doing sort of big shows like Goldsmiths Fair down in London, and like the Harrogate trade fairs, and yeah, big shows like that. So yeah, that was all sort of going really well. Unfortunately, yeah, in my personal life, didn't go so well, and I ended up having a premature baby. So he was born at very early at 25 weeks. So I really had to sort of put my whole jewellery career on hold and put that on the back burner and sort of to look after him, because I was in hospital for about 4.5 months with him, and then he came home on oxygen. So yeah, he needed quite a lot of additional care for the sort of first sort of 4 years of his life. So I was just, yeah, and I was a single parent as well. So I was just really concentrating on that. So a lot kind of in that time period went on the back burner. So yeah, so really the whole Cruciferous Croft thing came about a couple of years ago. Sort of I kind of just wanted to create a more abundant life for us, and sort of, sort of find myself again, and really put the croft to sort of fulfill my obligations as a crofter, and, realize the potential of the croft, which I hadn't really been doing, just because I was so, yeah, caught up with things personally. So yeah, so it came to sort of, like COVID lockdown, and I got into sort of growing more things, and sort of fertilizing the land more, because we live right next to the sea, and that's a great source of seaweed, which is a great source of fertilization. So I was building that up, and yeah, it's something that's traditionally been used for hundreds of years here as a fertilizer. So I was building that up. Yeah, I mean, it was all part of the original plan, because obviously when I took over the croft, I had to submit a business plan of what I would be doing. So part of that was to do my jewellery business as a sort of diversification thing, and then to also be sort of self-sufficient in growing things, maybe a sort of market garden type thing. Um, but yeah, I was just sort of growing, and I found that things grew pretty well actually. Once you get that seaweed on, I mean, it's not the best quality of soil where we are, but with that addition, things were growing really well. And I found that cabbages in particular were growing really well. So that was the sort of first light bulb moment, and then, to be honest, I've actually always loved sauerkraut. My first foray, I mean, it's not traditionally sort of part of our diet here in the Highlands and historically, but when I was in school, I did German, and I went to stay in Berlin for 3 weeks. So I was really sort of thrust into their sort of diet and what they have. So, and obviously sauerkraut is a big part of that. So I kind of really developed a palate for it, like, way back then, sort of like 25 odd years ago. And then when I left home, that became, I would always look for that. I mean, it wasn't 25 years ago, it wasn't really sort of trendy, but you could find it sometimes in Lidl, or, when sort of there's sort of, sections in supermarkets, like the Polish section was sort of coming into play there. You could find it there. So I've always quite liked that, and I've always like veered more towards sort of adventurous food really, because the sort of traditional Highland thing is leans more into like, stews and mince and tatties and things like that. And one day I was just sort of in my fields, and, sort of doing my seaweedy thing, and a friend that I hadn't seen in years came to visit me, and he'd brought along this sort of kimchi pickly thing that someone else had made, and I tried it, and I was like, my taste buds were just blown away, and it was like a pure light bulb moment for me. I just thought, well, I should be doing this with my own vegetables that I'm producing. So it just that's where that was the sort of thunderbolt moment, and then from there on, sort of there were just more sort of clues and sort of openings for me, sort of led the way. So about, I don't know, maybe about 6 months after that, an actual vegetable fermentation course became available in Ullapool, the sort of neighbouring town. a girl called Hannah Taylor. She does kombucha. It's called Gut Feels. So she goes around doing a lot of vegetable fermentation courses. So I did her course, and I was amazed, at the process, and I was amazed at the health benefits. I mean, I've always like I say, enjoyed this kind of food, but I never actually realized what the health benefits are. So she gave an excellent sort of masterclass in that, and
Can we talk a little bit then about the health benefits for anyone that's listening and doesn't really know what sauerkraut is? As you say, it's sort of something that you associate more with Europe as a kind of side dish, but it has become more popular now because people are talking about gut health quite seriously and the more processed foods that we all eat.
the whole gut health thing has really blown up in the past sort of 10 years. So yeah, like you say, more like Germany and Eastern Europe, and also like Korea with kimchi. They obviously swear by that there. And so basically, in the fermentation process, lactic acid bacteria occurs. So basically, your vegetables are kept in a salty brine in an anaerobic environment, so no oxygen. So in that, the sort of any bad bacteria dies off and the good bacteria blooms, and you get this lactic acid, and that is the sort of main component of what's really good for your gut health. And the sort of acidity also acts as the preservative as well for the cabbage or the vegetable in question. Um, so yeah, there's lots of great microbes, which is great for your microbiome, and just the way the structure of the cabbage changes under the fermentation process, it just makes it a lot more easy to digest. So it's quite good for people with digestive issues.
And from my basic understanding of gut health, eating something like a sauerkraut or a kimchi introduces the good gut bacteria. So if you're particularly like after maybe a period of antibiotics or something.
Yeah, well, apparently it's one of the best probiotics you can have. So it's live. The stuff that you get in the supermarkets tends to be pasteurized. So a lot of the bacteria is killed off in that process to sort of make it shelf stable. Because I guess the trouble is with not the trouble, but when the sort of ferments I'm making, sort of the artisan ones that I'm selling at, markets and things like that, they do sort of bubble, and but that's just purely the live ferment doing its job. But in terms of like supermarkets, they don't really want that on their shelves. They don't want like spillage, and so for supermarket purposes, it has to be pasteurized. But in that, you lose a lot of the good health benefits from it.
That's interesting. And then when you're talking about your own products sort of bubbling away there, what is the shelf life for your products then?
Well, the sort of recommended, like through testing, it's about 3 to 4 months in the fridge. But actually, it will, if it's kept correctly and under a brine, it will last a lot more than that. You can sort of keep them up to a year. But I think the recommended before it starts to maybe change quality, probably 3 to 4 months.
Yeah. And so let's take a step back then and talk about when your friend came on to the croft and brought a kimchi or sauerkraut, whatever it was, that gave you the idea. At that point, what sort of vegetables were you growing and what were you doing with them?
Well, at that point, I was purely, it was just on a very sort of experimental, just for personal use basis. I'd got about 15 or 16 raised beds in place, and yeah, I was growing cabbage, and kohlrabi did really well, and beetroot. Those were the sort of main things, and I was quite stunned with like fairly minimal effort on my end. Just put the seaweed in, put the seedlings in, and they I was quite astounded. It was quite encouraging.
And you didn't have any polytunnels or do you have any polytunnels now?
I don't have any polytunnels, no, and that was the other factor. This is something I could grow without that expense.
Yeah. And do you find any issues with pests like cabbage butterfly or anything?
A little, but I do put netting over them. And slugs are always a problem, but I just have to go on a slug patrol and
At night.
feed some of them to the chickens. Yeah, exactly. Because I want to keep it as a sort of no nasties sort of operation, no chemicals or anything like that. So
So you're chemical free, but not necessarily certified organic, or no, just.
no, not Saha, just chemical free.
And when you started then, designing your product or coming up with the idea of let's have a go at making a sauerkraut? What were your first sort of steps? Where did you go to, design your own recipe?
Well, there is a lot online, so I think it was just a collection of finding. There's lots of Facebook groups for fermentation with hundreds of thousands of group members. So yeah, it's a big world. It is a big thing globally. So it's just a process of trial and error and see what works for you and what works in bulk as well, because something that might
Mhm.
work on a small scale might not transfer as to working in bulk. So and there is a lot that can go wrong and does go wrong with fermentation. So, you have to have stable temperature conditions and, it has to be a sealed environment. Even some ingredients can throw things, like if you put, say if it's something with lemon or that can throw things if you put too much in, or things like cinnamon and things like that. It can throw the ferment off. So you do have to, there is a bit of an art to it. And there was a famous case, I think it was a cabbage farm in America, and they lost $1 million because they produced a cabbage that wasn't suitable for sauerkraut, and it ended up in a mush. And
Oh,
what happened in that scenario is that they were using their fertilizer was from chickens that had been using feed that had glyphosate in it, and that transferred into the fertilizer and actually broke down the sort of cells within the cabbage. So yeah, they had like £1 million worth of useless sauerkraut
oh
that had gone to
gosh.
mush. So yeah, there are quite a lot of factors into making a good fermentation.
And you've obviously got your recipe sorted now. You know what you're doing. Is there different varieties, or do you just have one variety?
Yeah, I've got loads of varieties actually, and that's I think maybe that comes from my creative background. I love to experiment and come up with novel sort of flavor ways. So I've got a kimchi variety.
Mhm.
So that's got the gochujang spice and with sort of ginger and garlic and mooly radish. I don't actually grow that mooly radish myself, but the cabbage is the main component, which I do grow. So I've got, yeah, sort of various like curry, Moroccan spiced ones, lemon and dill. Yeah, I'll be doing some Christmassy themed ones with sort of cinnamon and Christmas spices and things like that.
Sound fantastic. I've never really had much sauerkraut or kimchi, I must admit, and the ones that I have tried have always been from the supermarket. And it's interesting what you were saying that they're just not the same.
They're quite different. I think the sort of home style artisan ferments, they're a lot crunchier as well, and they've got
Okay.
a much sort of deeper taste profile, I would say.
Where do you sell your products then, Barbara?
At the moment, it's just really sort of small markets and then bigger sort of Christmas shows. So I'm hoping to do well. There's Taste North up in Wick, which I did last year, which is quite a big food.
Hmm.
So and little sort of food festivals, and then I'm also hoping to do there's this exclusively Highlands these exclusively Highlands events. You may have heard of them. There's one at Eden Court, which is like a food and craft fair over 3 days. That'll be at the end of November.
Hmm.
And then at the Dingwall Mart, they have a big sort of food and craft Christmas fair. So I'm kind of keeping it to that at the moment. And
Yeah.
I probably don't, like I say, because of the issues around supermarket, sort of legislation and, spillage and shelf life and things like that. I probably won't be going for supermarkets, and I'm not really that sort of big of an operation that I could do that. Doing these sort of smaller things and sort of food festivals is more sort of profitable for me. So
Yeah. And do you think at some point you could maybe speak to local farm shops and that sort of thing and get it in on the shelf there?
I've already sort of yeah made contact with quite a few, and they're keen. It's just I think I'm kind of concentrating on just retail at the moment myself,
Mhm.
just because yeah obviously the profit margins are better.
You were talking there about, doing the sort of food festivals and Christmas markets and things like that. It's obviously a good chance for you to speak to your customers and find out
Hmm.
what they're looking for. Have you found that people are more interested in where their food comes from now?
Oh yeah, definitely. Uh-huh.
And do you think it's important for you then to be at those shows so that they can connect with you as a crofter and find out about your story?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a really good selling point as well, and people might just walk by, but once you get chatting to them and tell them the whole story and the health benefits, and you get them to try some, it's a pretty easy sell, to be honest.
That's
I see.
great.
So, and I've been quite amazed at the feedback. Really, yeah. Basically, a couple of years ago, I applied for, because if you have a croft, you can apply for an agricultural building grant.
Hmm.
So, through the sort of rural payment scheme. So next to the house, I've got a barn, which I always thought would be brilliant for some sort of purpose. And I put my business plan together and I applied, and I felt really confident about it because it's something that it's an idea, a business idea that includes the croft and growing, and it's an added value thing. So I was pretty gutted when I got a rejection
Mm.
back from that. So and I was almost going to sort of give up on the idea because I really kind of needed that as a premises to work from. Literally a week later, this scheme came up. It was called Impact 30, part of Highlands and Islands Enterprise. So it was a year-long business course. I thought, well, to heck with it. I'll not give up quite yet. And yeah, so I did that, and I received quite a lot of business support from that. Yeah, that gave me the sort of push on to keep going.
Did that give you a capital grant to sort of convert the shed then, or was it more sort of advice?
It was more advice, but from there on, that opened up quite a lot of different other doors as well. And um, I sort of wanted to appeal the decision and show that I was really serious and that this business, this it did have some mileage in it. And so sort of artisan fermenters, there's not really any in the Highlands at the moment.
Okay.
There's quite a few in the sort of Central Belt and sort of east of Scotland, but I really thought this is a gap in the market not to be missed.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was just thought, yeah, I was pretty, yeah, disappointed that they weren't really going for it. So yeah, so I had to really sort of prove my case that I was committed to this idea, and that, that I was definitely going to go forth with it. And once I'd sort of set in my mind that I really am committed to doing this, like I say, different doors and different opportunities started to sort of build. I mean, they weren't necessarily financial, but it was support nonetheless, and it was good for my appeal. And eventually I was granted it, which is great. So
I think it's difficult with a lot of these grants and schemes and subsidies. There's obviously, scoring criteria to meet or whatever. But it's fantastic when you get a grant like that, and it sounds like your business is exactly the sort of business that should be supported because it's something innovative and something new in your area, and helping you as a sort of new entrant to crofting because you started a new croft.
so yeah, so within that, so I mentioned that there was a few other sort of stepping stones in getting there. So yeah, there was the Impact 30 scheme, and then there was the Farming Advisory Service mentoring scheme as well. So that came into it as well. So I signed up. I saw an advert for that just popped up out of nowhere, and so yeah, I was assigned. You get the choice whether to have one. It's 4 days of mentorship, so you can either select one person who aligns. You get a list of people who you can choose from who maybe have something in common with what your business is doing.
Mhm.
So or you can choose two. So I thought, well, I'll try two out to get the best of two different worlds. So yeah, so I got Bosse Dahlgren. He's a Swedish farmer, and he's written a book with his wife called Meadows. So it's all about sort of sustainable farming, sort of slow farming. So yeah, he came up all the way from Fife to visit me on the croft, and gave me some really good pointers. So yeah, it was really good of them to come all that way. Really appreciate it. So it was really beneficial to get their sort of support and approval, and they really sort of supported what I was doing.
Can we just talk a bit more about the mentoring scheme then? So you signed up and you pick whoever you want to mentor, and he came up to visit. So how was the sort of, did you have a structure of how you were going to structure your days, to make the most of the time you had together?
Yeah, we sort of chatted about it beforehand, but we just sort of it sort of just sort of naturally unfolded really. And I sort of gave them a tour around the place and, told them the sort of techniques I was using to grow. And he gave me some really useful information. So obviously with cabbages, you're not supposed to grow them in the same spot every year. So initially the business started off as just sauerkraut,
Hmm.
but with that in mind, I've had to sort of edge into thinking about growing other vegetables to ferment, so I can rotate that. So put a few suggestions my way. So yeah, like beetroot and like pickling cucumbers, the sort of hard skin variety, but also, and this I'd never heard of this vegetable before, a mangelwurzel.
Oh,
He brought one of them up, which is like it's like a really massive root vegetable. I think it's related to a beetroot, but
okay.
it's white and it's not as earthy as a beetroot and it's sweeter. So I think it's a vegetable that's kind of fallen out of favor, and you can't really get it anywhere. So anyway, I grew them this year and they've actually grown amazingly well. So that's definitely added to the list.
They sound like a roll dal vegetable, don't they? They don't sound like a yeah, don't sound like a real thing. So what are you planning on doing with those? Fermenting them or
Yeah, they'll be. I've already sort of started to harvest some of them, and they ferment really well actually. So I
brilliant.
ferment them. I do one variety with garlic and chili, and
Mhm.
another with sort of lemon, rosemary, and black pepper. So, and yeah, they've turned out really well.
So your mentor, does he grow vegetables as well? Is that why you picked him, or was it just his sort of ethos of on sustainable farming?
He grows, yeah, he's done all sorts of farming over the years, from, yeah, I think dairy, and he's been a farmer up in Sweden and also on the East Coast as well. So, yeah, he had a real sort of wealth of knowledge. And my other mentor, that was Liz Paul. So I was sort of attracted to what she could offer just because she was, a female in crofting and, she
Mhm.
was involved in quite a lot of things and she'd done a market garden type of business as well. So I thought she would be quite valuable. So, but we haven't quite finished our mentoring journey yet because she's had a lot sort of crop up this year personally. So we'll probably be finishing probably more towards the end of the year. So, but
Yeah.
so far she's been really, it's been really great to chat with her and get her perspective.
It's probably nice to have 2 people and possibly a gap in time between them as well, it gives you time to go and implement some things and then go back to them and yeah, follow up on that. So it's great to hear someone's using, the Farm Advisory Service mentoring scheme so well and
I didn't really know what to expect, but it actually, like, well, far exceeded my expectations, and I was really happy that, yeah, that I'd gone for it. So
fantastic. And for anyone listening that wants to find out more about the mentoring service, we will put some links in the show notes for people to go and follow that through. So we mentioned there a little bit about sustainability and your mentors bringing that in from their experience. Do you think that's important to you in your business and what you're sort of experimenting on that regard? You mentioned seaweed as a sort of natural fertilizers or any other sustainability practices that you try?
yeah, well, I'm sort of in terms of weed, it's just purely cardboard. It's like I don't throw a cardboard box out. Cardboard's always going down. Yeah, weeds are quite bad, and yeah, I sort of do the sort of hole no dig thing as well. But yeah, it's a sort of field to plate product, so it's something I know it will take quite a few years to make it, like truly profitable. I'm quite happy to take it, slowly.
You mentioned no dig there. I've read a little bit about that online. I've forgotten the name of the chap that sort of has a big garden that does it. Is it somebody Dowling? I've forgotten his name. But the sort of premise of the no dig is that you use cardboard as a sort of weed suppressant and then add lots of compost on top. Are you adding compost or is it just the seaweed that you're using?
It's mainly the seaweed, yeah, I mean, I have used some of because my dad's obviously he's a sheep crofter and he's got an agricultural shed and that's quite a good source of manure as well. So
Fantastic. And do you collaborate with any other local producers for things like getting organic manure or any other food products to put into your sauerkrauts?
not at the moment. I mean, I'm using blackthorn sea salt for my brine, so that's further down the west coast. So yeah, using some of that. I think as time goes on and hopefully, I become a bigger operation, yeah, I hope to collaborate with other yeah, there is a community garden over in Appleby, and we've been in talks about them maybe supplying, some of the garlics and chilies and things like that. So that's definitely something that I'm open to, and yeah, working with that, as if I do need to expand production, um, you know, maybe getting other crofters to grow cabbages, I can buy off them as well if I can't, keep up with demand.
Have there been any sort of big lessons or turning points in your journey so far that have shaped where you are today, do you think?
It's probably, just not to give up and stick to your guns, especially when you know that you've got a good idea.
I suppose being adaptable, you mentioned having your son so premature and, that's sort of turning your life upside down really as it would. But I think it's fantastic that you've built what you have, from a time that I'm sure was incredibly difficult, to then be able to support yourselves on a croft is fantastic. It must feel, that you've taken on something that was, somebody else's croft. You've taken it all on from scratch. You've renovated your house, started another business whilst, supporting family. It's amazing what you've been doing.
It's been quite hard going. There's probably there's been struggles there, but yeah, I feel like I'm sort of rising from the ashes a bit now with my sauerkraut in hand. So
What an image. What's next for Cruciferous Croft then, Barbara? You got any future plans?
well, basically, it's carrying on. We're sort of banging sort of harvest season now. I've got loads of cabbages to harvest, hundreds upon hundreds. So they've really grown well this summer. So I'm delighted about that because it got to about a month, 6 weeks ago, and they're looking very leafy, but they've gained some really good heads on them. So yeah, just about to harvest that and building up my stock for the Christmas season.
Mhm.
So that's the plan for then, and we'll just see. I'll be growing lots of seeing as the mangel wurzels did so well this year, I'll be ready to plant lots of them next year as well, and sort of expand in my area of where I've been growing too. So to develop more. But yeah, I've also been another opportunity is with HIE. They've got this food tech hub,
Mhm.
and you can get some one-to-one. This is all free help. You can get a chef to work on recipes for you. So I've been working with somebody called Morag Hamilton, and she's a chef that's been sort of developing some other sort of flavor ways for me.
Brilliant.
So that's been really good to have as well.
Yeah, fantastic. It all sounds really exciting future ahead for you. And finally, then, Barbara, what would be your top tips for a sort of someone starting out in crofting?
I would say that things like Rome wasn't built in a day, and things will take a lot longer than you anticipate, and but to not be disheartened. Yeah, it's kind of like it's slow gains, but you can eventually look back. Yeah, it just takes time, basically. Time, yeah. Just be patient as well, I would say.
Yeah, I think there's temptations there when you get something new to jump in all guns blazing, thinking it's gonna take off. But it sounds like a slow, steady build from what you're doing, experimenting, getting some advice, getting some support from other organisations and other people doing similar things has really helped your business. So it's great to hear that you're making use of all these different grants and advice schemes that are out there.
That's what I would also add to that there is actually quite a lot of help out there, and it's not always immediately obvious. And quite often, it's when um, like I did this Impact 30 scheme,
Hmm.
that opened other doors of other sort of possibilities. So, and other connections. And yeah, I would say networking as well is really important. Yeah.
I can imagine, particularly in crofting, which like all types of farming, at times can feel quite isolating if you're just working away on the day to day.
It's like today, I mean, I was quite nervous about coming on here because I'm so used to working on my own and in my own thoughts or with my son, having child conversations. So, yeah, to, to have an actual adult conversation for any sustained period is, yeah.
I think it just gives you new ideas, doesn't it? Getting off croft or speaking to someone different, even if you're, doing as we're doing today, is talking remotely. To get off croft or speak to someone in another aspect of industry is always helpful to get new ideas and connections. say. So thank you very much, Barbara. We wish you all the best for the future with your sauerkrauts.
No, not at all. I really, it's been really nice for you to give me this platform to speak.
I think we'll all be looking out for your products at upcoming markets and things as well. Looking forward to trying
Ah, yes, yes, yeah. You never know where I might be popping up.
it out. Thank you so much for your time today, Barbara.
That's okay. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Agriculture. If you'd like to get in touch or find out more about Cruciferous Croft, the Farm Advisory Service Mentoring Scheme, the HIE Food and Drink Tech Hub, or the other sources of support that Barbara mentioned, you can find links in the show notes. This episode was presented by me, Mary Jane Laurie, produced by Kerry Hammond, and edited by Cameron Wach in association with the Scottish Government.
The Farm Advisory Service Podcast. Audio advice on livestock, crops and soils, environment, rural business, and more. Brought to you in association with the Scottish Government.